Chapter 6, Still Warm. The stairs groan under David's weight. Each step creaks like it's trying to warn him, go back, but he keeps moving, one hand gripping the rusted rail, the other clutching a dented flashlight. The beam sputters as he descends, bouncing off crumbling brick and flaking paint, catching long-forgotten stains that still shimmer faintly in the dark. The air is damp, metallic, the kind of cold that gets into your gums. A hiss from one of the cracked pipes overhead startles a cluster of rats into the shadows. David doesn't notice, or doesn't care. At the bottom of the stairs, he unlocks the steel door with trembling hands. 3 deadbolts, each one louder than it needs to be. When the last one snaps free, the door groans open like it's in pain. And there she is. She lies beneath a curved pane of glass, half frosted from within, her body sealed in ice like a saint in a reliquary. Tubes run in and out of her, some carrying coolant, others pumping God knows what through her desiccated veins. Her name, Elizabeth, is written on a faded tag taped to the side, as if he might forget. He steps close, puts one liver-spotted hand against the glass. His breath fogs it up. He wipes it away with the edge of his coat, revealing her face again. Pale, peaceful, waiting. "Morning, love," he says softly. "Didn't sleep a wink myself." A low, steady beep, beep. Beep comes from a nearby monitor. Not her heart. That's long gone. It's just a timer, a reminder. He's running out of time. She was beautiful once. David remembered her most clearly in summer, on the lawn behind their old place, barefoot, a book in one hand, the other holding a sweating glass of sweet tea. Her laugh was sharp and sudden, like a breaking dish. She used to tease him about being too serious. "You'd dissect your own jokes if it got you published," she'd said once, tossing a cherry pit at his forehead. They danced in the kitchen sometimes. No music, just the clatter of pans and the low hum of their cheap fridge. He'd pretend to dip her, and she'd pretend to fall, laughing the whole time. That was before the coughing started, before the silences got heavy. They used to talk about death, not morbidly, like scientists. Theories, what-ifs, what-nexts. She believed in souls. He didn't. She said death wasn't an ending, just a curtain call. He said it was a system shutdown. "There's poetry in entropy," he once told her, thinking he was clever. She kissed him and said, "You're an idiot, but you're my idiot." The lab hums like it's trying to remember its purpose. Tubes drip, a ceiling fan turns slowly, clicking with each rotation, stirring the scent of antiseptic and something far less clean. He walks past his failures. Each slab holds a body, or what's left of one, covered in plastic, tagged like meat. Subject 12, Subject 29, Elizabeth Control, and so on. Some are missing parts, some have too many. He doesn't look at them anymore. Not really. They're tools, notes, practice. Only one matters. He sits heavily at the terminal, wipes dust from the screen, and types in a few commands. Her vitals come up, frozen, preserved. He double-checks her brain temp, just to be sure. It's always the brain that slips first. The monitor pings, no change. He exhales, relieved or disappointed, even he's not sure. "Still with me," he murmurs. "Good girl." More memories. They used to read aloud to each other in bed, mostly old medical texts, which she insisted were more romantic than poetry. One night she'd read a passage about early cryogenics, failed experiments, cracked skulls, liquefied brains, and laughed until she snorted. He'd watched her, her shoulders shaking, and thought he could die happy right then. Then, somewhere along the way, she started reading less, sleeping more. The cough got worse. The jokes got sparse. She wore her sweaters all summer, said the world felt too cold. She died in the autumn, quickly, quietly, or so he told people. The truth, it doesn't come all at once. It trickles in, slips behind your ears and under your nails. A look she gave him, a pill bottle in the trash, the locked bathroom door. He'd found her there. He'd screamed until his throat bled. Then he'd cleaned her up, dressed her in her favorite blouse, and laid her in their bed like nothing happened. By dawn, the plan was already forming. David rubs his eyes, skin flakes off on his fingers. The lines in his face are deep now, carved by time and regret. He walks back to her chamber and kneels beside it. The ice hisses quietly. "I'll fix it," he says. His voice breaks on the last word. "I swear to God, Liz, I just need a little more time." He stays there for a while, listening to the machines, to the silence, to the sound of everything he's done echoing back at him. And if he thinks he sees her move behind the glass, just for a second, he doesn't mention it. Because if she did, He's not ready yet. He dug at night. Not just because of the obvious, though yes, the cemetery was locked, the streets were empty, and the living were far less forgiving than the dead, but because the quiet helped him think, gave him time to remember her face without the static of the day. Without the voice in his head that whispered this is insane every time the shovel bit into frozen dirt. She'd only been in the ground a week. 7 days since the service, closed casket, short guest list. 7 days since he lied through tight teeth to friends, nurses, the priest. She went peacefully. In her sleep, no pain. 7 days since he'd scrubbed the bathtub clean and burned her robe behind the house. Now he was wrist deep in clay, grunting like an animal. Every so often he'd stop listening, not for footsteps, but for her, like maybe she'd call out from below. But all he heard was the wind. When the shovel hit wood, he cried. Getting her home was harder than he expected. The body was heavier than memory made it, stiffer too. He'd rigged a gurney into the back of his van, laid her on a layer of ice and plastic, bundled her up like she was going on a long trip. She looked peaceful. That's what he told himself. By the time they reached the asylum, his lab now, though the ghosts probably had seniority, he was shaking from more than cold. The old place was buried deep in the woods, condemned, forgotten, perfect. The generator was already running, buried beneath 6 feet of cement and wires. He wheeled her through rusted halls, past rooms where patients had once howled and scribbled prayers on the walls. The elevator didn't work, so he used the freight ramp, descending 2 levels until the light above turned from flickering yellow to dull, sterile blue. The sub-basement, home, cryopreservation was never meant for this, not fully. He'd salvaged what he could, custom tanks, pressure stabilizers, even a compressor from an old morgue freezer. She lay in the center of the room now, nestled in a makeshift capsule that hissed cold mist and pumped antifreeze through translucent veins. "I'll fix it," he said. "I'll make it right." He said it often, like prayer. The rats were first, then frogs, then a cat he found curled dead behind the gas station. The results were promising if you squinted. A twitch here, a heartbeat there, nothing more than echoes, really. Ghosts in the muscle. Then he moved to humans. They came from graveyards mostly, county lots, potter's fields. He learned to dig quick, learned how long before the brain went jelly, how soft the skull got after a week in wet soil. He kept logs, made charts, timed everything. It was science, at least at first. Fresh bodies didn't work. Something about the soul still hovering, too stubborn to let go. Old ones were worse. The meat refused to remember, but something in between, that was the key. Not too warm, not too gone, still warm. By the end of that winter, he was thinner, meaner. His skin had gone translucent under the fluorescence, fingers stiff, eyes yellowed from lack of sleep and too much adrenaline. He'd broken into a city morgue and pulled out a John Doe with a neck tattoo and 6 bullet holes. Nothing. Tried again. A heart attack victim. Nothing. Then came the girl. A nursing student. Car wreck. They said she died instantly, but her face was untouched. Pale. Serene. She looked like she'd fallen asleep behind the wheel and dreamed her way into the tree. He watched her funeral from the trees, returned that night. He was halfway through digging when he heard the crunch of boots behind him. "Hey! What the hell do you think?" David turned without thinking. The flashlight caught the guard's face. Middle-aged, tired, about to be a grandfather if the photos in his wallet were true. David swung the shovel before the man could say another word. Caught him on the temple, once, twice, then silence. He buried the man in the girl's grave and took her instead. He logged every detail. Subject 47, female, mid-20s, athletic, trauma limited to cervical spine and lower ribs, minimal brain hemorrhaging, prime condition. He cleaned her, prepped her, cut her open, and slid the tubing in with the steady hands of a man who's done this 100 times and never once admitted it wasn't working. She didn't twitch, not at first. He spoke to her as he worked. "Elizabeth would have liked you," he said. She was a teacher too, literature mostly, but she respected the sciences, even when they scared her. The lab was quiet except for the hum of compressors and the occasional drip of condensation from above. Bodies lined the room like a morgue caught mid-autopsy. Some had tags, most didn't. He sealed Subject 47 into her capsule, ran the current, watched the vitals, waited. It happened at 4:03 a.m., just a flicker, barely there, but he saw it. Her finger moved, slow, deliberate. Then her eye opened. He didn't scream, didn't gasp or shout or fall to his knees in mad joy like a man in a movie. He just stood there and whispered like a man greeting a ghost, "Hello." The tape clicks on, a low hiss. Then David's voice, steady at first, careful in that practiced way of men who've spent their lives being taken seriously. Lab entry 1347. Time 6:16 a.m. External temp 31 degrees. Internal chamber holding at -2.5 Celsius. Subject 47 remains stable, intermittently responsive. A pause, the sound of rustling paper. A chair creaks. Something wet drips in the background, steady like a clock with blood in its gears. She blinked again, David says, voice soft now like he's afraid someone else might hear. Not a spasm, not residual twitching, purposeful, her left eye only. Duration, 1.4 seconds. Another pause. His breath catches, then steadies. I believe she sees me. The lab is colder than usual. He doesn't feel it much anymore. His joints ache constantly, but the cold numbs that too. He's grateful for it, in a way. The bodies don't seem to mind. They lie on slabs, some with sheets drawn halfway over, others bare, left mid-examination, as if waiting for him to return with answers. Most are tagged. Subject 34, Subject 51, Subject 11A. The ones that got further along, those have names. There's Margaret, who sang once. Just once. Mouth still sewn shut. Jonas, who broke all his fingers in the night. Daniel, who whispered stop for 20 minutes straight until his throat collapsed. David avoids looking at those too long. They were lessons, all of them. He spends more and more time with Subject 47 now, sitting beside her, watching, waiting, talking. Sometimes when he speaks to her, she turns her head slightly, just enough to make him wonder. Elizabeth would have loved you, he says one morning, spooning paste into a beaker, then tapping it against the side like it's coffee. You're strong, not just physically. It takes something special to come back from death. You've done that. You've come farther than any of them. She doesn't respond. Her chest doesn't rise. Not yet. Still, he smiles. I named you, by the way, properly. Took me a while. Hope you don't mind. He reaches for a file and flips it open, revealing a grainy photo. Her before. Alive. Happy. Your name was Grace. Beautiful, right? It fits. He doesn't hear the quiet click of a muscle tightening in her leg. David still records everything. But the notes have shifted. Where once they were clean, clinical, pulse rates, tissue resilience, synaptic reactivity, they now read like confessionals. Subject 12 reacted negatively to neural stimulant, began seizure, expired after 36 seconds. Subject 39 screamed my name before tearing off her own face, disposed of remains, can't risk contamination. Subject 44 tried to kiss me, had to sever spine, and buried in the margins, scribbled like secrets. I miss the way she said my name. I think the smell is in my skin now. Sometimes I dream she's already back, and she hates me. He doesn't sleep much. He talks to Elizabeth every day, stands by her capsule, brushes frost from the glass, hums a tune she used to sing while folding laundry. Sometimes he opens the chamber just enough to reach inside and stroke her hair. It's stiff, matted in places, but he still calls it soft. It's almost time, he whispers. Grace is nearly complete. She'll show me how. Then I'll bring you back. He presses his forehead to the glass and closes his eyes. I'll get it right. Behind him, Grace's fingers curl slightly. One evening, he reviews footage of past revivals, grainy black and white clips stored on ancient drives and labeled with red X's. Subject 6 sat up and screamed for his mother before stroking out. Subject 15 begged for water, then bit through his own tongue. Subject 27 moved without instruction, humming an old hymn for 20 minutes before crumpling like paper. Subject 33 whispered help 37 times, slower each time, before falling silent. 62 attempts, 62 failures. And yet Grace breathes. Just barely. And not always, but enough. She isn't dead. She's waiting. That night, he leaves the tape running longer than usual. His voice, half asleep, spills into the microphone, rambling. I used to think it was about the body. If I could just preserve the tissue, patch the synapses, force the heart to beat again, she'd come back. But it's not just the body, it's the mind, the soul maybe, or the rot. Maybe that's the real trick. Silence. Then, they fight when they remember who they were. They scream, they beg, they refuse. That's where I went wrong. Another pause. The hiss of the machine grows louder like it's leaning in. The brain has to decay, not completely, just enough to obey. The tape clicks off. He wakes the next morning to find Grace sitting upright. Her eyes are open. She doesn't blink. He doesn't scream. He only whispers, "Good morning." It started with music, that old vinyl crackle, the one from the Glenn Campbell record Elizabeth used to spin on Sunday mornings while she made pancakes. He hadn't played it in years, thought he'd thrown it out actually, but there it was, humming from the dark, filling the hallway. David followed it barefoot, the asylum suddenly whole around him. Clean floors, fresh paint, sunshine bleeding through tall windows like honey. Everything was warm, familiar. She was in the kitchen, just like always. Back to him, humming, swaying gently as she stirred something in a pan. Her robe hung loosely off one shoulder. Her hair was longer than he remembered. When she turned, she smiled, but it was wrong. The smile didn't reach her eyes. Her skin was too pale, and when she stepped closer, he saw her lips moving, but no sound came out. Just silence. That awful, static-filled silence like the dead air between radio stations. He reached for her hand. It was ice. She leaned in, whispered something into his ear. Still no sound, but he felt the words all the same, felt them press against his ribs and twist. He woke screaming. He didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. When he finally did, the dream returned. Same smile, same silence, but this time when he looked down, he saw himself, scalpel in hand, blood on his apron. Her chest opened like a cabinet door. He whispered to her, "It's almost time," and she wept without sound. The flashback came while he was injecting saline into Grace's femoral artery. No warning, just a rush of memory, hot and sudden like a fever. Elizabeth was sitting on the edge of the bed, arms crossed, staring at the floor. Her voice was sharp, brittle with something he hadn't wanted to name back then. Fear. "You need to let me go," she'd said. "You think I don't see the way you look at me, like I'm a problem to solve?" He'd chuckled nervously, waved it off. "You're not a problem, you're sick, there's a difference." "No," she said, "you're sick, I'm just dying." She grabbed his wrist, pulled it tight between both of hers. "Promise me, when it happens, promise you won't try to bring me back." He looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were wet. Not scared, resigned. He said nothing. That was the last honest conversation they ever had. Back in the lab, David stood over Grace and told himself it was a trick of memory. False recollection. The mind preserving itself by staging interventions. Brains do that sometimes, when guilt turns corrosive. He opened the journal to a fresh page and wrote, "Memory is an unreliable narrator. She wanted to live. I know she did." He didn't look at Elizabeth that day. Grace was standing now, fully upright, still naked, her skin a patchwork of grays and blues, veins like spider legs branching beneath translucent flesh. Her head hung to the side, but her eyes, those stayed locked on him whenever he walked by. He'd found her in different positions lately, closer to the table, closer to the tank, once standing directly behind him, silent as the grave he pulled her from. He didn't comment on it, just logged the movement. Reflexive positioning, he'd written. Potential residual mapping from hippocampus. But he started locking the lab doors again, just in case. The final phase required precision, timing, ritual. He called it that not for any spiritual reason, but because by now everything he did felt religious. The same motions over and over, the same prayers muttered beneath his breath as wires sparked and needles plunged. He began preparing Elizabeth's chamber, tuning the serum concentration, checking the pulse generator for conductivity. The cryo latches groaned when he opened them. Frost flaked like ash onto the floor. Her face looked unchanged. Perfect. He ran one hand gently through her hair. It snapped under his fingers like brittle straw. "You'll be warm again soon," he whispered. Grace stood in the far corner, still, but watching, always watching. David didn't sleep that night. He didn't dream either, just kept moving. Ritual, routine, resurrection. David lit the candles, though he told himself it was just for the light. The fluorescents had been flickering too often lately, buzzing like angry bees overhead, and the generator hadn't been reliable since the snow started piling up on the roof. But that wasn't really why he did it. No, candles were for her. For them. He placed them around the room with care, one by the tank, one at each corner of the slab, and a final one near the monitor that tracked brainwave activity, though it hadn't registered anything useful in years. Still, the candlelight gave the lab a strange warmth, almost holy. He liked the way the shadows swayed. He cleaned the slab with a cloth soaked in vodka and salt. his own ritual, long since removed from medical necessity. The steel had been stained a dozen times over with old blood and bile, but he scrubbed until it gleamed, until he could see himself in the warped reflection. He looked like a ghost. But ghosts didn't bleed. He tested the hydraulic lift, adjusted the restraints, replaced the old leather with new straps cut from a dog harness he'd ordered online under a fake name. Then he opened the tank. Elizabeth lay still beneath the fog. Her skin had thinned from the cold, stretched almost porcelain tight. She looked delicate, breakable, like the wrong word might shatter her. He reached in with gloved hands and began his work. First, the stitches. He'd sewn her jaw shut when he first brought her here, not out of necessity, but grief. The thought of her mouth slack and open in death had been too much. Now he cut the threads loose, gently, reverently. Her lips parted just slightly, as if she were about to speak. He swallowed. Next, he took the razor and began shaving her face. Light strokes, careful not to nick the skin. Not that she would have minded. Not that she could. "You always said you hated stubble," he murmured, voice thick. "Said it made me look like a trucker." A chuckle escaped, hollow and low. He finished with a comb and a small pair of scissors, trimming the hair along her hairline, brushing loose strands from her cheeks. "My queen," he said, touching her cheek, "deserves to look perfect." Behind him, something shifted. David didn't turn. He knew it was Grace. She'd taken to mimicking him in subtle ways. At first it was just posture, leaning when he leaned, tilting her head in tandem. Then it became gestures, a nod, a slow breath. Once he caught her brushing imaginary hair from her own face while he shaved Elizabeth's. He told himself it was coincidence, echoes in the brain, muscle memory, nothing more. But the timing was too precise, the movement too fluid, too knowing. He'd started whispering into his notes that she might be dreaming with her eyes open, that something in her was watching, waiting. David turned on the main breaker. The room buzzed to life. Monitors flickered, tubes pulsed. The pump hissed as fluid began circulating into the cold veins of the woman he loved. Above her, the surgical lamp glowed like a sun, sterile, righteous. He prepped the serum, 3 vials, red as rust, viscous. He loaded the first into the injection port on her neck, the second into her arm, the third he held for a moment, turning it over in the candlelight. "You know, I still remember the first time we talked about this," he said, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore. "You laughed, called me Frankenstein, said no one should come back from the dead unless they had an apology prepared." He looked down at her. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he inserted the final vial. Behind him, Grace stepped forward. He didn't see the scalpel in her hand, didn't hear the faint rasp of steel against bone as her fingers closed tighter around the handle. She mirrored his posture now, head bowed, shoulders hunched, as if preparing for communion. David turned to the control panel, entered the sequence. His hands trembled, but he didn't fumble. He'd done this 100 times, never with her, not until now. The room grew darker as the auxiliary power cut, just the hum of the mainframe and the slow building whine of the voltage regulator. The light above Elizabeth flared once, then steadied. David looked down at her, eyes glassy. "You'll be warm again soon, my love." There was a sound like breathing, not hers, not his. It came from everywhere at once, thin, papery, like lungs full of moths. David looked up from the control panel. The needles on the monitors fluttered, voltage climbing, blood pumps whirring to life. Everything was ready. He turned back to Elizabeth, hand trembling as it reached to check her vitals one last time. And that's when Grace, Subject 47, spoke. "You gave me life," she said, her voice clear and whole and wrong. But no name, no choice. David froze. He didn't turn immediately. Couldn't. Every muscle locked up like old metal in winter. His mind tried to rationalize it, delayed neural activation, a reflex. Echoes of her old voice. Nothing more. But she kept speaking. "I watched you rot, day after day, smelled it in your sweat, saw it in your eyes. You decayed while I waited." Now he turned. Grace stood tall, not slumped or twitching, not vacant like the others. She stood with intention. She held the scalpel loose at her side, like she'd forgotten it was there, like it wasn't meant for him, yet. "I learned everything from you," she said. "How to move, how to hide, how to pretend. You taught me well." David backed away, hands up, palms trembling. "Grace, that's not my name." Her face didn't twitch. Her voice didn't rise. She spoke like someone reading an autopsy report aloud to a class of eager students. You didn't give me one, just a number, a category, like all the others. But I remember who I was now, her name, her life, the one you stole. David's mouth opened, but no words came out. Grace stepped forward. You talk about love like it's enough to excuse what you've done, like grief gives you permission, but you never asked, you just took. Her eyes, milky blue and rimmed with veins, settled on Elizabeth. And now you want to do it again. No, David croaked. It's not the same. She's different. Grace tilted her head. Because she loved you? David nodded too quickly. Then why did she make you promise not to bring her back? The room went silent. David's knees nearly gave out. The hum of the machines, the dripping pipes, even the whine of the voltage regulator, all of it faded into the background. That question was a gunshot. Grace stepped beside the slab, looked down at Elizabeth the way someone might regard a sleeping child or a ticking bomb. You said the brain has to rot, she said softly. Just enough to follow, not enough to think. That was your mistake. David stepped forward, pleading now. Please, please don't do this. I'm not the one doing it. She reached to the console, flipped the final switch. The surge hit like thunder. Electricity jumped from panel to panel, dancing across wires and clamps, racing down conduits like veins. Sparks bloomed from old copper. Fuses burst. The room went white for a blink, and then came the sound, wailing, dozens of voices, some high, others low, some gurgled. One just laughed, short and wet and broken. The corpses moved, twitching first, then writhing, then crawling. Subject 29 slammed a fist against the wall, fingers falling off as they struck. Subject 34 bit through her own tongue, blood fountaining down her chin as she screamed. Subject 12 didn't move until it did, limbs jerking into place like a puppet with tangled strings. They came for David. He stumbled back, eyes wild. Stop! I can fix this! I can fix all of it! Grace watched, impassive. The dead don't want fixing, she said. They want rest. But you can't let go, can you? He slipped on something slick, hit the ground hard. His wrist cracked under his weight. They're confused, he shouted, voice breaking. They're not ready. They're not her. Grace knelt beside him. They don't need to be. Then she stood, stepped aside, and the ghouls surged. Hands gripped his arms. Fingers dug into his scalp, pulling him backward. He kicked, screamed, bit down on his own tongue just to feel something real. But it was too late. The last thing he saw before they dragged him under was Elizabeth. Still cold, still untouched, still dead. Grace approached her slowly, carefully, as if afraid the slab might vanish if she stepped too hard. She wiped the frost from Elizabeth's brow with a piece of gauze, smoothed the hair back, adjusted her head slightly, turning it toward the candlelight. She stared for a long time, then said, softly, "No one wants to be alone. The asylum is quiet now, not the kind of quiet that comes from peace, but the other kind, the kind that hangs over places long after the screaming stops. Dust settles like ash in the corners, wires dangle like veins, split and humming low. Somewhere deep in the walls, water still drips. The generator sputters its last breath, but nothing moves, not at first. Then through the cracked door of the old surgical theater, a light flickers on. Not electric. Candlelight soft, flickering. Reverent, it paints the walls gold and shadow, throws long shapes across the blood-stained floor. Two figures stand in its glow, one tall, one small, one alive in the wrong way, one dead in the same. They move slowly, stiff, rhythmic. A record spins on a warped turntable nearby, its needle skipping across a warped groove, catching pieces of a melody that once meant something. The music is broken, but it plays, and they dance, hand in hand. Her body leans just slightly, head resting on a shoulder that shouldn't hold her. His movements are careful, practiced. They sway together, one dragging the other pulled along. There's no love in the dance, but there's a kind of understanding. Maybe that's worse. The candle burns lower, the shadows grow longer, the song keeps playing, and through the cracked doorway that's all we see. Two shapes, moving like they remember how, like they'll never forget.